So before I introduce the panelists, minus Gabby, who goes without say, I just wanted to point out that we have seen a change in women's sports recently. We've seen a lot of growth in terms of popularity and in terms of audience, and it's really an exciting time. I don't think that it's just a fad. I think that we've got some changes that are here to stay. If you look at 2019, you see the Women's World Cup finals outperforming the men's in terms of television audience. And then you saw the same thing this past spring with the NCAA women finals. So I think we're at the crux of a sea change in sports, and these women are helping to lead that change. So I'm so excited to be here with them. I do have a few points on your bio to point out. Gabby, I don't think I can add anything to yours. I'm going to be honest. What can I say? Oh, I do know. When we did our prep, I asked her how much water she drinks in a day because she had this gigantic liter of water. I think she said it was a gallon of water in front of her. And I was drinking my Diet Pepsi and felt really bad about myself. And she said, no, she drinks coffee, water, and wine. So you're hearing it from an Olympic athlete. Wine is allowed. So I'm very excited about that. Carolyn, what can I add to yours? When we spoke, I love this. She told me that she was getting her master's and she had had an internship at Gatorade, and she said that upon graduation, she was not going to accept a job anywhere else except Gatorade. So lucky for Gatorade and lucky for Carolyn that that has happened, and she has spent 13 years at Gatorade.
9 years. I'm not that old. 9 years ago.
Oh, I'm sorry. Since 2013. I'm that old. You are not that old. She heads up brand strategy and also the Women's Advisory Board, which we are going to speak about later today because it's a very important initiative that is happening at Gatorade. And she lives in Chicago with her husband and 2 young kids. She is Philly born, and this may elicit some boos. I don't know. She is an avid Eagles fan.
We can talk later. I know those boos.
Trash. Missy, what can I add? You have, sorry, I'm going out of order. Missy on the end there. What can I add? She is doing her second stint in Dallas. She was at Frito-Lay, PepsiCo prior to that, as well as a number of other organizations. But what brought her back to Dallas was the opportunity to work at 7-Eleven while they're going through a fantastic transformation. And she states it as they really never had brand management before, and she is helping to lead that, which is fantastic. She is a diehard Clemson football and Tar Heels basketball fan. She is a Southern gal. She claims she was a jock coming out of the womb, and she loves the Atlanta Braves. I think everyone could get behind the Braves, yes? Tough crowd. And Ariel has a very unique background, having been having worked on both agency and on client side. She's been at Sutter Health, One Medical Group, and MRY Agency. And I love this. She requested to move accounts when she was at the agency side, demanding to work on Visa because she wanted to work on sports. And she was lucky enough to herald in a couple of their Olympic sponsorships. Ariel claims she grew up doing her job, as she used to tag along with her marketing executive dad to events at Madison Square Garden and other places. I don't know who you are a fan of. We didn't get that. UConn
fan.
And Gabby, who are you a fan of?
Oh, gosh.
Flojo.
Yeah. I'm a fan of athletes. I'm not loyal to any team.
So I was thinking to get us started here with these wonderful, wonderful panelists. Let's turn it over to you, and we can go straight down the road. Let's talk about where your passion for sports came from and how that has propelled you to where you are today.
Start with me? Yeah, well, I grew up playing pretty much every sport under the sun. My mom kept my brother and I very active and very busy growing up, so I started off with soccer. That was my first love. It actually ended up being the sport that I was recruited from. My Harvard track coach came to a soccer game, and then he recruited me to the track team. But I did everything from basketball to horseback riding to gymnastics to ballet. I really tried it all, and it kept me busy, and it made me very just happy as a child, just having something to look forward to. And I've grown so much from it. We talked a little bit about it on the past panel that I just did with John, but all the lessons that you get from the relationships you build from teammates to coaches, all the experiences, the traveling, the hardships that come from it, it all becomes just a part of who I am and a part of my journey. And I just love it. You know, I love the sports, whether it's a sport that I stuck with or a sport that I didn't end up loving itself. Everything that I learned and took from it just became a part of me. And I'm so grateful to still be an athlete to this day and to still have that as part of my journey. But that's kind of how I fell in love with it from such an early age.
Awesome. Love that. Grew up in a big Eagles household, so if I was going to talk to my dad on Sundays, we were probably going to talk about football. It was helpful to know what was going on in the football game. So that's where my passion for sports came from. And when I got to college, I had this crazy dream of being a sports reporter. So I went out and got myself a job as a sports reporter and figured out I did not, in fact, want to be a sports reporter. It's a very lonely lifestyle. You work the weekends. Sports happens on the weekends. If you're really, really good at your job, you file your story, your editor sends it along, and nobody talks to you, right? It's very solitary. The press box is designed to be quiet, and that's not who I am as a human being. So I got another job in the sports industry at a sports startup, and what I realized very quickly is that the people that work in sports have this wonderful humility about them, right? So we're here, we're seeing these athletes do amazing things on the field and on the track, and at the end of the day, it's sports, right? There's all of these great lessons that you take away. You said them so beautifully, but you learn how to work with people who are different from you. You learn about adversity. You learn teamwork. You learn hardship. All of those great lessons are what sports gives you beyond the field and beyond the track. And I knew this was a space, this is the kind of people I wanted to be around, this is the industry I wanted to be in. So even though my playing days are long beyond me, I knew this was where I was going to make my career. So just to have the absolute pleasure and the honor to work for a brand that believes this inside and out. And we have lots of people on our team that played sports, either at the Pee Wee level all the way up to, we have a colleague with a Super Bowl ring. But everyone who has touched sports in any way has had this experience of learning things and working with teammates. And that's really what drives my passion to stay in the industry.
Yeah, and as Becky alluded to, I grew up kind of doing what I do now. My dad was head of marketing at Blimpies, so my college internship was managing the Hero of the Month program, getting Blimpie sandwiches and going on the field at Yankee Stadium and presenting people in the community with awards and sandwiches, which is ultimately what I've been doing for the past 15 years in one way or another. But I think my original love for sports was that, I can pinpoint it, the day that Carrie Strug landed on one foot at the Olympics, and I got to meet her in the London Olympics, and I cried. I couldn't control myself. This was the woman that inspired me, and since then, I've really, looked at sports as a way to kind of merge the things I love, which is working in business, purpose-driven work, and sports, and finding ways to take sports and tie them all together and do something you love, but be surrounded by people that share your values pretty much everywhere you go at every touch point.
Ditto. As the moderator said, as Becky alluded to, that my mom says that my siblings and I came out of the womb either running or chasing a ball. And so played just like Gabby did, but not at the same level. Started as a swimmer, backstroker, played softball, played soccer I wasn't great at, but then basketball. And not only participating in sports my whole life, but my dad was a rabid fan. And again, do not interrupt him if Ohio State's on. And if they lose, just stay out of the room. And then going to big Southern universities, intramurals and sports are just endemic in the culture. And it's, we turn out for our student athletes. You go to the games. I have sisters that ran at Alabama in track and field. So, we went to track meets. You go to the football, basketball, softball, and you show up and you support. So that's just something that's been a part of my life. And then kind of just to round out the conversation is how that shaped my career. Well, I think all of us want to find that magical place where our career intersects and overlaps with what we love. And I've been gravitating towards sports or companies that are, on the fringe of either music or sports promotion. And I did do a stint with a pharmaceutical company, and much respect and love for those folks. But Gabby, on weekends, I'm not going to read a clinical white paper on treating comorbid atherosclerosis and hypertension. I just can't do it. I'm not that smart. So, do something you have a passion for. And then just to echo, there's so many things you learn through participating in sports or watching world-class athletes. And clearly sportsmanship, teamwork, work ethic, grit and determination. But I'm going to coin a phrase that we've all said, that you can't be comfortable and grow, whether that's in your career or as a person. And it gets difficult. And, again, we're in a transformation at 7-Eleven, and it's tough. We're kind of building it from the roots up. And I'm going to quote Dabo Sweeney, our football coach at Clemson. He says it's BYOG. You got to bring your own guts, right? And that's where, when it gets difficult, you got to reach down deep inside and remember, why are you doing this? What's your passion? What's your commitment? You've worked hard for it. You have the right to win and the right to succeed, and you've got to be that catalyst. And and you can lead from any seat, but you need to be the person that's pulling yourself up, being the cheerleader, and pulling your teammates up when they're down. And so bring your own guts, right? It's the difference between finishing and finishing great.
I think I learned BYOB at college, but I like that. I like that a lot. You can just feel the passion from all of these panelists. And when I did my prep calls with all of them, what really stood out to me is that the passion began in youth. For some right out of the womb, but the passion began in youth, and I think that's really important. They were nurtured by their parents, by their communities, by their coaches, by their leagues, and I think that is something for us to keep in mind as we groom the next generation of female athletes. So I just loved hearing your stories. This next question is going to be for Missy, Ariel, and Carolyn. And can you share examples of how your companies or brands align with sports or athletes to complement your corporate goals? And feel free to talk about your current brand initiatives.
I'll go first then. 7-Eleven, we got now almost 14,000 retail outlets in the U.S. alone, 77,000 globally. But we are really focused on serving the shoppers that visit our stores and the communities in which we operate. So it's really not just a C-store. It's a community center. And we know our shoppers are coming into our stores to get food and beverage and then leaving to go do something else. And so we're maniacally focused on how can we make it more convenient, and wherever they're going, how can we make them owning that moment more awesome? So we call it Activate Awesome, right? We're helping them do what kick-ass daily is kind of what we say in the office. And we know that sports are something our customers have a passion point for. And a lot of times, whether they're going to, we talked about going to get Gatorade to go to their kids' soccer practice, or they're going to tailgate or going to their friend's house for the big game. They're coming into our stores to buy product, food and beverage to have at the game. So we are absolutely in the conversation. And our brand started in Dallas, Texas, 97 years ago. And so Dallas is our hometown, and we want to be absolutely a part of the sports conversation and making those moments awesome. And so we have partnered around the calendar with the Cowboys, with the Rangers, with Texas Motor Speedway, with the Mavs, and with the Stars. And, we talked yesterday about co-creating, but we always strive to figure out, like with the Stars or with the Mavs, we have Slurpee booths, and we do things like if to bring out the fandom. They might have if somebody gets checked really hard, or slam dunk over somebody, it might be like ooh, that's cold moment, and we will deliver a Slurpee to your seat. Small example, but again, it's trying to find ways to make that fandom great. And then football and in Jerry World, you have the Cowboy Stadium as well as the Texas Rangers ballpark. We actually built a store right there, and it's about making it convenient and awesome at those tailgates. And if you're running out of beer or snacks or Gatorade, you can get on our app, 7Now, drop a pin, and we'll deliver it straight to your tailgate. So it doesn't get any more convenient or awesome than that. So just small examples, but ways that we try to make frictionless convenience and bring a little more joy to sports and our shoppers.
That's wonderful. I mean, it's really interesting. I'm sitting here with someone from 7-Eleven to my left and someone from Gatorade to my right and an Olympic athlete. And I'd just like to survey the group. Has anyone heard of Laurel Springs School before, other than our beautiful president and his friends here? And I think that's the point, is we are new to the game. We are a 30-year-old online private school with some of the best athletes, musicians, artists, and actors in the world attending our school. But until the pandemic hit, we were boutique. All of a sudden, online school became the flashy thing, and we basically doubled business overnight. We got a new leadership, brought on people like me to say, how do we actually turn this beautiful boutique school that has this amazing product into a business and get it in front of people and offer this opportunity of what we call limitless learning, meaning that it's asynchronous. You can learn on your own schedule. If you're a professional athlete, you can run all day long and go to school when you want. You're not going to come home from a track meet on a Sunday and be like, oh, shoot, I have to study, I have a test. You put a blackout date on your calendar. So we really are modeled around supporting these athletes from the get-go. But now, this year, what I've been brought on to do is say, how do we, turn this into a marketing initiative? So we've done partnerships with IMG Academy, the SCPGA, the Chicago Fire, the San Jose Earthquakes, looking at how we can support these really highly competitive athletes who are pursuing their dreams. And Gabby, what I loved when you were speaking is you're clearly a student athlete, with the student word being first. And that's how we look at our students, is how do we make it easy for you to be a student and an athlete and not have to choose one or the other? So what we're doing right now is creating all these incredible partnerships that show the broader sports community you can have it all, you can be supported, and you can go on and achieve great things. What was it, 71% of our graduates got into their first choice college last year. So really setting students up for success, and I'll talk more about that later, but just really excited to start getting the brand out there this year.
Awesome. So we are an endemic sports brand. So history of Gatorade in 30 seconds or less. Dr. Robert Cade, 1965, he was trying to find a way to help the players not be so tired at the end of football games. Put this concoction together, carbohydrates and electrolytes. His wife suggested that he might add some lemon juice to it. Lemonade for the Gators became Gatorade. We were born in the lab and proven on the field, and that continues to be how we show up for athletes every single day. So the way that we interact with sports is that very authentic sports fuel story. You have to trust our brand enough to put it inside your body, right? It's one thing to try on a pair of shoes, a new glove. You can give those things a try. If you put it inside your body, there are real consequences, right, if it goes wrong. So we've spent 57 years building up that trust, and that trust is why we don't pay for Super Bowl advertising. The best advertisement we get is that those players are authentically using that product every time you see a shot of the sideline. So our partnerships are really based on trust and making sure the players, the coaches, the registered dietitians, anyone who's recommending a product to an athlete at any level, whether it be the first time your 5-year-old tries soccer or that Super Bowl champion, they have to trust our brand enough to know that they're putting the right thing in their player's body. It's going to help them deliver at the moments that it matters most. So that's the first thing we do, is make sure that we have those trust and those relationships. The other piece, the really fun part of the job, is when we get to work with athletes on innovation. So right now, there's a limited edition flavor in stores that we worked on with Serena Williams. And it was so fun to build a flavor with her. We also worked with her to design the label. She's got her own reusable squeeze bottle that you can purchase. You can customize it with your name on it. It's so fun to go through that process with her and say, what do you want? What do you want in this flavor? What do you want in the color? How do you want this to show up and be an expression of you? Because our athletes think about Gatorade as a part of their gear just the way they think of their track shoes or the hat they're putting on their head, the thing that helps them get ready for the game. Gatorade is part of that game day routine. So really making sure that authenticity comes across in that used by the pros messaging, as well as our entire innovation journey with anything that we put out into the world.
Fantastic. Gabby, we just heard earlier how you came to be a partner of New Balance, and they are so lucky, and you are so lucky that you found your home here. I'm curious, what other brands, Gabby, we'll start with you, do you think are getting it right when it comes to supporting equity and diversity in sports marketing?
Yeah, so when I look at brands to work with, it is, like I mentioned with John, I am very intentional about the messaging that they're getting across. I'm intentional about the mission that they're trying to put forward and their visions and kind of what they're doing with the community. And like I mentioned, New Balance is one that is very good about that, and I'm really excited to work with because they do work with me to empower the communities that I am a part of in the spaces that I occupy. And a lot of those projects were aligned with my own personal goals. So like the volunteer healthcare clinic that New Balance helped me do donations for and volunteer with, as well as the campaign with Joe Fresh Goods that we talked about earlier that helped to amplify the Black voice and the Black communities and the conversations that are being had. It was a really empowering project and something that is very unique to New Balance and what they're doing. Other brands that I work with that I love are Lenovo, for example, the computers. They work with me to get messaging across about how important education is, and the actual product they use is sustainable plastics or recycled plastics, which is very sustainable. And I think their messaging is also really in line with what I'm trying to do and get the messaging out about education and getting access to different equipment like laptops. Super Coffee in the food and beverage space is another brand that I work with. And like you mentioned, it's really important to know what you're putting in your body as an athlete. And their whole platform is being incredibly healthy and using less sugar. And they're very transparent about the ingredients that are going into their product, which is something that I really appreciate. And it's very important to have that education and transparency with people who are buying the product. There are a lot of demographics who don't know what's going into their body, what they're purchasing, and they don't really have the option to even know that. So Super Coffee is a really just amazing brand in that and very unique in that space. Another thing that we don't really talk about a lot when I go up on events like this is how athletes ourselves are a brand, and it's really important for me to understand the impact that I have. As athletes, we are our own personal brand, especially in track and field when we compete as our own individual entity. And my name, Gabby Thomas, isn't really associated with the team or anything like that. So I become my own personal brand, and what I put out there and what I'm saying and what I'm doing actually affects a lot of people who do follow sports and who follow me. And a lot of times athletes aren't entirely. They don't feel like they need to be a brand or they're responsible for what they're putting out there, but I personally feel like I do, and we do, and we kind of have a responsibility to be aware of what we are putting out there. And so I love that I've been given the opportunity as an athlete to have a platform and to share about things that matter to me, such as health equity and getting those conversations started and having those conversations happen. And when I'm presented with opportunities to do media or interviews or have my platform, it's always something that I like to put out there. And even just as with my actions, and I know a lot of the younger generations are following what I do, just making sure that everything that I actually physically do aligns with the mission that I want to put out there and my goals. And I hope that people follow along and kind of learn something.
That is wonderful and beautiful that you learned that at beginning point of your career. Thank you for sharing that. Does anyone else have examples of brands that you think are getting it right when it comes to equity?
Yeah, I love what DoorDash is doing. I think that DoorDash, I look at the example of them sponsoring Angel City, the NWSL team, and the fact that 10% of Angel City's partnership funds go towards community programming. So DoorDash partners with them on food scarcity in the LA community. They're partnering with them, connecting Black-owned businesses and really bringing that up to the forefront of their messaging. They're doing that with a ton of leagues right now, and I just think, they're a big brand that definitely was thriving during the pandemic, and they're using their influence for good, and I'm really happy to see it.
Well, I have to add that we are also a founding partner with Angel City FC, and the best part of that partnership is the 10% that's going back to help teach girls to coach girls soccer. So you had trouble finding a female coach for track and field athletes. It's even worse in soccer. So we worked specifically with Angel City to say, well, what do you want this 10% of proceeds to go back to? And they said there's not a good coaching pipeline. And when girls don't see coaching opportunities for themselves, they're more reluctant to walk into a situation where they just don't feel comfortable, right? If the coach doesn't look like me, sound like me, talk like me, I can't see myself in that space, I'm not going to sign up for it. And that's why we get fewer girls leaning into play soccer. So really excited about that part of the partnership. Ben & Jerry's does this really, really well. Ben & Jerry's is unapologetic about their views, their passion points. You can track the sustainability of ingredients, as you were talking about, all the way back to where they get their chocolate from. And they are not afraid to take a stand, even though their parent company doesn't always agree with them, right? So Unilever kind of lets them do what they're going to do sometimes, and they come out and they make really big, bold statements. And I have so much admiration for the way that Ben & Jerry's leads by example with the causes that they get behind.
And then I am just going to jump on the Angel City train one more time because they had their opening game this weekend, and it was a big deal. Third Love is also a sponsor of theirs. So they're donating sports bras to young girls all over the LA community because they realized that was the biggest barrier for getting girls into soccer in low-income communities, was just access to equipment, real things they need. And Third Love, that's their first sports sponsorship. That is not something, it's not an endemic segment that you think of when looking at partnerships. And this is what I love about sports sponsorships is right now, is how brands are getting really creative about stepping up, and they're thinking beyond just the obvious marketing opportunity and actually giving back. And that's the piece that's really fun right now.
Carolyn, I'm going to give you a chance to brag. Can you talk about what you are doing with your Women's Advisory Council? It's so magical.
Yeah, it's less bragging and more showcasing that we don't know what we're doing and we need help to do it better. So about a year ago, we pulled together what we call our Women's Advisory Board. And quarterly, we meet with pretty outspoken members of the media. We have some athletes on the board. We have longtime partners. We have folks in the nonprofit space. And we ask them to hold us accountable for the way that we are showing up for women in sports. So we kind of open up our books and we show them where we're spending media dollars, where we are supporting as we think about the camps and the tournaments and the formative experiences that we host, how many of those get to girls. When we put together our campaign planning for the year, how many professional athletes that we're showing in our ads are women versus men? How do we think about our messaging? One very, very concrete example of this is a lot of girls will tell you that they are athletic, but they won't call themselves an athlete. So I don't know if you went through this at all, but you'll see a lot of girls who are extremely talented, and they'll say, I work out, I play sports, but no, I'm not an athlete. So the fact that we lean in on that word, athlete, in a lot of our messaging does not get through to half the population. So that's a big problem. So our Women's Advisory Board holds us accountable for all of this, and we, on a quarterly basis, we get very strong feedback from them on what we should be doing and moving forward to make the world of sport better, more inclusive, more welcoming for girls. And because of the first couple of things that they told us very quickly, we shifted a lot of our messaging last year. We did a brand new campaign with the WNBA, Watch This, where we featured young girls, and actually the voice of a young girl was the voiceover in the spot. So that's something we never tried before, worked really, really hard for us. Candace Parker then narrated our biggest campaign to kick off this year that launched around NBA All-Star right after the Super Bowl. We really leaned in on these voices of women and making sure that we're showing young women and girls just as much, if not more so, than boys. The other thing we learned when we did some research is that showing female athletes, not off-putting to male athletes. So putting more Serenas in the spot brings men along too. So it's not an either or, it's not a zero-sum game. We need to think differently about how we make sure that these messages get out there in the right spaces and putting our dollars where our mouth is when we talk about really supporting women and girls in sport.
Thank you so much, and congratulations on those efforts. I think that brings up a good point. There is this disparity between how women feel and the passion for women's sports, the growth of women's sports in terms of the audience, which we spoke about earlier, and the money that is put behind sports in terms of TV sponsorships, TV rights, the amount of news coverage, athletes' pay has been a large topic in recent years. So I would love to hear from all of you. What do you think brands can do, or your brand specifically, in order to further this conversation and to limit some of those disparities?
I think, first of all, that was really powerful, what you mentioned about what your brand is doing, because I know that being an athlete is something that growing up for me, and I'm sure a lot of people in this room, was really, really reserved in terms of messaging for men. And then growing up as a very, very athletic female, and a lot of us are, not actually seeing yourself as an athlete. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying in the previous panel with John, is that I never saw myself being a professional athlete, and part of that is because of the messaging and how we grew up in society. I probably was the most athletic growing up in every team and every sport that I was doing, but it still did not occur to me that I was going to grow up and be a professional athlete. Didn't know if I wanted to. I just didn't think I could. And that's because we don't see it very often. It's not seen, it's not shown. And I know that a lot of men do grow up with that dream, and they're thinking, I am going to be a professional athlete. I'm going to be in the NFL. I'm going to be an NBA player, even if they are the least athletic man in that room. If we're being honest. And I've had so many conversations like that. But they believe they can do it. And that's all about the messaging in society. But I think how we can move forward and with the parity and women's sports and equal pay and the interest in it. I know for us athletes personally, the female athletes are doing a lot right now in getting that out there and using our brand, our personal brands, and the brands that we work with the messaging. And the first step is really talking about it and being as loud and disruptive as we can be. And I think that we are doing an excellent job in that space right now, and we can only do better. But as an athlete, just having those conversations and talking to the younger generations that are following us and making sure that we're very strategic about which brands we're partnering with and ensuring that their missions are aligned with ours and working towards that inequity in female sports is really just it's crucial. So I think that's happening right now, and we're in the right direction. So it's really great to be even sitting here alongside with brands who are so passionate about that because it makes a big difference.
3 big things our advisory board asked us to do, and so we're doing all 3 of them. One is on the media side, so again, shifting our spending. We made some very quick changes to make sure that, for example, all women's NCAA championships this spring will have Gatorade ads running in them. That's the first time we've done that, especially the track and field championships. I was really excited to hear that we're doing that for the first time. So that's one big one, is just on media spend. Then there's grassroots opportunities. So how do we make sure there's enough opportunities so that parents can sign their girls up for sports? If there's no girls' soccer club or soccer team in your neighborhood, of course we're not going to get girls playing sports. You can't be what you can't see. There's no role models and there's no pipeline there. So making sure we run thousands of camps reaching 8.5 million athletes every summer across the country. How do we make sure that they're not all football camps? Right, we got to make sure that there's space for girls to sign up and feel like they belong as part of the community. And then the third piece is coaching the coaches. So no matter who you are as a coach, you need to understand things about women that are different from men. You need to understand things that are different from girls and boys. How do you talk to a girl who just got her period in the middle of your tournament or camp or whatever it is and make her feel like she's part of the team and she can come back? That's totally normal. Most coaches have no idea how to deal with that. So we worked with our Gatorade Sports Science Institute and put together a couple of infographics that have been incredibly highly picked up by the coaches that are helping run these tournaments for these 8.5 million kids all summer. And they're like, thank you. Now somebody is going to help me and I don't have to stare awkwardly at this girl. There's so many things like that about how do you shop for the right sports bra, right? There's so many places that girls drop out of sports because nobody told the coach what to say. And there's so many volunteer coaches across America who are trying to do the right thing. If we can help coach the coaches, that'll help bridge that gap and make sure girls stay in sports for longer.
Yes. Love all of those things. When we were looking at how we were going to invest in sports, it was really important for me to stop and look at who's our student population. And it really is half girls and half boys. So when I was looking at where we're going to invest, it was really essential to say, how are we distributing dollars evenly? And that's where relationships like IMG Academy came up, relationships like the SCPGA, where they have both men and women, girls and boys, playing and investing in their sports. Yes, the media dollars will not be the same. Yes, the field space might be a little different. But overall, these are brands that are not girls' brands and boy brands. And saying, we want to work with a brand that actually represents who we are as an organization and shares our values. They're investing in both. They're investing in the growth of women. IMG Academy is going to be announcing a number of women's sports coming to campus in this next year, and will continue to grow. And when they said that to me, I was like, okay, you hear, you get it. These are the kind of people I want to work with. The same with the SCPGA. You know, they don't talk about women's golf and men's golf. They're just SCPGA players that are getting celebrated. And that's how we look at our students, is these are Laurel Springs students that are striving and thriving. So we want to make sure that they feel represented in the organizations that we're, you know, partnering with.
I think just to kind of round out the conversation here, as marketers, we have an amazing platform, and we have an opportunity, and dare I say obligation, to message in the appropriate way. And it's not an or anymore, it's an and. I mean, we're in motorsports and just did something with a female NASCAR driver. It's an and. So, you know, convenience stores, there's a lot of old stereotypes that were, you know, gas, smokes, and Cokes, but we've really evolved. We've really evolved beyond that. And again, we are maniacally focused about adding awesomeness and convenience to our customer. And women need that too. We all need it. And so when we do our shopper marketing programs, right, we want to have a broad aperture of appeal, because we have 50% of our shoppers are women. So that's where, whether it's gaming or, as I just alluded to, some sports, we try to absolutely make sure that we keep that broad aperture. Everybody should feel welcome and included, because that's what we are, a community center, and it's for everybody. So we just did, we're doing a gaming promotion right now featuring Rocket League. And for those of you who may not be familiar with it, you play soccer by driving a car. So we just did a social media activation where we got a professional soccer player, and he's actually now Danny Rojas on Ted Lasso, so Cristo Fernandez. But the race car driver is Tony Bradinger, right? She's a female NASCAR driver. And then we paired them up with gamer influencers, a male and a female, and just watched magic happen. And so there's ways to do that. We do football promotions, and, you know, clearly we want really approachable personalities. We just did Dak Prescott and Juju Smith-Schuster, who's amazing. But we had Erin Andrews. I mean, she is synonymous, a female face with football. And again, just be very mindful. And we also have a panel. It's internal, but we are diversity and inclusivity. And all of our consumer-facing creative goes through that. Again, just make sure that we're approaching our communities in the right way. 7-Eleven's for everybody, and our parking lots are somewhat of a stage of life. There's a lot of things that go on in those parking lots. But the point is, everybody's welcome.
Thank you. I'm getting the sign. Does that mean time for questions, or, we are... And this was so riveting. We took up all the time. So if you have any questions, you can find these lovely ladies after the conference. But thank you again for having us here.